January 6, 1997. A quiet Ontario neighborhood was still asleep when Nathaniel Melson stepped out of his car, heart pounding, an obsession in full bloom. Moments later, Kathy and Jeffrey Essery's peaceful home would become a crime scene, changing the course of their lives for the worst. Here are the 7 most disturbing killer teachers in history.
How does this compare to other cases that you had over your career?
This was the slaughter of an entire family. It was cold, it was calculated, it was planned, and he then disappeared, and we didn't know where he was.
November 9th, 1971, Westfield, New Jersey. The List family mansion sat eerily silent, every room lit, but no sign of life. Neighbors noticed the lights burning day and night, but no one was entering or leaving. Weeks passed before suspicion finally forced police to break in. John Emil List, by all appearances a faithful Lutheran, Sunday school teacher, and respected accountant, had orchestrated a massacre so cold and calculated that it took nearly a month before anyone realized his entire family was gone. His wife Helen, his mother Alma, and all 3 of his children, Patricia, John, and Frederick, were executed in their own home while List vanished without a trace.
And I guess because he was unable to find work and support his family, he got in such a state that, for what he claims, is that the only way to save them was to send them to heaven.
Those were the words of Detective Jeff Hummel, who would later play a crucial part in bringing List to justice. His disgust is palpable. A man who murdered his family to save their souls, but lacked the courage to face his own judgment. List's plan was meticulous. He canceled mail and newspaper delivery, told schools and employers the family would be visiting a sick relative in North Carolina, and even removed his image from every family photo in the house. The mansion's temperature was lowered to preserve the bodies. He left a 5-page confession letter explaining his twisted reasoning to his pastor. The investigation quickly stalled. List's careful preparations meant authorities found no evidence of his whereabouts. The family car was discovered at JFK Airport, but List wasn't on any flight manifest. His financial trail went cold. He'd closed accounts, withdrawn cash, and disappeared into thin air. List resurfaced as Robert Peter Clark, moving first to Denver, then Richmond, Virginia. He remarried, joined another Lutheran congregation, and lived a seemingly normal life for 18 years. Detective Hummel reopened the case in 1984, determined to find List. The breakthrough came with the launch of America's Most Wanted. Using crime scene photos, a forensic sculptor created a lifelike bust, showing what List might look like after nearly 2 decades. The response was immediate. A former neighbor recognized Bob Clark and alerted authorities. June 1, 1989, John List was arrested at his accounting firm in Virginia. Even then, he maintained his false identity until fingerprints confirmed the truth. In court, List recounted his financial collapse, his wife's illness and alcoholism, and his fear of public humiliation. He claimed he killed his family to save their souls from spiritual ruin. The jury saw through his justifications, convicting him on 5 counts of first-degree murder. List received 5 consecutive life sentences, ensuring he'd never walk free again. He died in prison in 2008, taking his twisted logic to the grave. John List's story remains one of the most disturbing cases of a seemingly normal man hiding monstrous intentions. But if you think the John List murders couldn't get any more shocking, wait until you hear about the next case. A teacher turned deputy, whose darkness went even deeper.
You would really need to go out of your way to meet a more dangerous and despicable individual. There's no doubt that he displayed the sort of characteristics that serial killers generally display, but I think Schaefer was much worse than the average.
July 21st, 1972. 2 teenage girls, Nancy Trotter and Paula Wells, thought they'd caught a lucky ride with a cop in broad daylight. That lucky ride nearly became their final one. Gerard John Schaefer Jr. was no ordinary police officer. Behind his badge, he hid a monstrous double life as one of America's most twisted serial killers, earning names like the Killer Cop and the Hangman. While sworn to protect, Schaefer hunted women, using his uniform to disarm their suspicion. Schaefer's upbringing in Wisconsin seemed normal at first glance. He was a decent student, played football, and worked as a fishing guide. But beneath the surface, darkness brewed. In his teens, he became a peeping Tom, developed sadomasochistic fantasies, and began cross-dressing. These urges only grew worse as he aged. His teaching career was short-lived. Students and parents complained about his behavior. He often forced his political and moral views on his classes. Fired from multiple schools, Schaefer switched careers, becoming a cop in Wilton Manors, Florida. This new role gave him power, authority, and crucially, access. Schaefer quickly developed a disturbing pattern. He'd pull over female drivers for minor infractions, then use their information to stalk them. His superiors caught on and fired him, but not before he'd moved on to Martin County Sheriff's Department by forging a recommendation letter. Then came his first known attack. He picked up Trotter and Wells while on duty, warning them about the dangers of hitchhiking. The next day, in plain clothes, he offered them a ride to Jensen Beach. Instead, he drove them deep into the woods, handcuffed and gagged them, then tied each to a separate tree with a noose around her neck, forcing them to balance on exposed roots. He told them he was going to rape and kill them. Suddenly, his police radio crackled with an urgent call. Schaefer left, warning the girls not to try escaping. It was a rare stroke of luck. The girls managed to free themselves and staggered to safety. Schaefer called his boss, pretending he'd just been teaching them a lesson about hitchhiking. The sheriff didn't buy it. Schaefer was arrested and fired, but made bail and lay low, working at a grocery store. But the stalking continued. On September 27, 1972, Schaefer met Susan Place and Georgia Jessup at an adult education center. He introduced himself as Jerry Shepard. Place's suspicious mother recorded his license plate before they left for a beach trip. The girls vanished. October 26, 1972, Mary Briscolina and Elsie Farmer disappeared hitchhiking. January 11, 1973, 19-year-old hitchhikers Colette Goodenough and Barbara Wilcox vanished in Florida. Schaefer made a long-distance call from Iowa shortly before their disappearance. Schaefer's luck finally ran out when a father and son found decomposed remains near Port St. Lucie. Evidence at the scene, the Roadrunner genes, unique bindings, and carved initials matched Schaefer's methods. Place and Jessup had been bound, mutilated, and decapitated. Police found hundreds of pages of Schaefer's gruesome fiction in his mother's home, detailing abductions, torture, and murders matching unsolved cases. They found personal belongings of numerous missing women, weapons, and disturbing photos, some showing Schaefer cross-dressing and simulating his own hanging. The evidence was overwhelming. Schaefer was charged with first-degree murder for Place and Jessup. The jury deliberated just 5 hours before finding him guilty. He received 2 life sentences. In prison, Schaefer became infamous for his killer fiction writing. He taunted investigators with claims of up to 80 victims. Most believed he killed at least 11. He even sued authors and FBI agents for calling him a serial killer, while privately admitting his fiction was true. On December 3, 1995, justice finally caught up with Schaefer. Fellow inmates, tired of his informant ways, stabbed him over 40 times, slit his throat, and destroyed his right eye. He died as violently as he lived. Gerard John Schaefer used his badge as camouflage, preying on the trust of those he swore to protect. His story is a chilling reminder. Sometimes, evil wears a uniform. Although Schaefer's actions were heinous in nature, the next case takes the teacher's desk of terror to an entirely new level, simply because he could not handle rejection.
The Alabama Supreme Court rejected Amy Bishop Anderson's request to overturn her capital murder conviction.
Bishop Anderson killed 3 University of Alabama and Huntsville colleagues and wounded 3 others in a shooting rampage during a biology faculty meeting in February of 2010.
February 12, 2010, Huntsville, Alabama. A routine biology department faculty meeting at the University of Alabama in Huntsville was about to end when a 45-year-old associate professor, Dr. Amy Bishop, calmly pulled a 9mm handgun from her bag and opened fire on her colleagues. In less than a minute, Bishop killed 3 professors, Gopi Podila, Maria Ragland Davis, and Adriel Johnson, and wounded 3 others. She had blocked the only exit, turning the small conference room into a kill zone. Her rampage ended only when her weapon jammed. Several surviving colleagues, including Deborah Moriarty, risked their lives to push Bishop out of the room and barricade the door. Moments later, Bishop was calmly washing her hands in a restroom when police apprehended her. The campus was thrown into chaos. News quickly spread that the shooter was Amy Bishop, a respected neurobiologist with a Harvard PhD, mother of 4, and by all appearances, a driven academic with no criminal record. But beneath the surface, Amy Bishop's life was a powder keg of unaddressed violence, professional frustration, and personal instability. Bishop's academic troubles began in 2009 when she was denied tenure at UAH. Despite her Harvard pedigree, her publication record was thin, and she had alienated colleagues and students alike. She responded to the tenure denial with a series of appeals, legal threats, and increasingly erratic behavior. By spring 2010, her employment was set to end. But the warning signs went far deeper than professional frustration. In 1986, Bishop, then 21, shot and killed her 18-year-old brother Seth in their Massachusetts home. The death was ruled accidental, but recent investigations revealed disturbing details. After shooting Seth, Bishop fled the house, brandished the shotgun at a nearby auto shop, and demanded a car. She was arrested at gunpoint but released hours later after her politically connected mother intervened. No charges were filed. That incident was just the beginning. In 1993, Bishop was investigated for sending a pipe to her former Harvard supervisor. The case remains unsolved, but witnesses recalled Bishop and her husband discussing revenge and bomb-making materials. In 2002, she was arrested for assaulting a woman at an IHOP over a booster seat, screaming, "I am Dr. Amy Bishop," before punching the woman in the head. Charges were dropped, and the incident never appeared on her record. Bishop's professional life was equally volatile. At UAH, she was notorious for erratic behavior, outbursts in meetings, and poor teaching. She dismissed graduate students arbitrarily and published an article listing her husband and 3 children as co-authors. Colleagues described her as crazy and out of touch with reality, warning administration repeatedly about her instability. Despite these red flags, Bishop continued teaching and researching. She and her husband developed a cell incubator device that attracted significant investment, but it failed to deliver promised results. Her obsession with patents over publications contributed to her tenure denial. The shooting's aftermath revealed a pattern of enabling behavior from family and authorities. Bishop's parents maintained that the shooting of her brother was accidental, despite mounting evidence to the contrary. Her Harvard credentials, once a source of pride, became a symbol of how institutional prestige can mask underlying issues. During her trial, Bishop claimed memory loss about the shooting. She was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia, but had managed to function for decades. In September 2012, she pleaded guilty to capital murder and attempted murder, receiving life without parole. The decision not to pursue the death penalty came after surviving victims and families of the deceased requested clemency. Bishop's story is a cautionary tale about institutional failure, unchecked privilege, and the dangers of ignoring warning signs. Her pattern of violence, enabled by family connections and professional status, ultimately cost 3 innocent lives and destroyed countless others. Shockingly, the tragedy's reach extended even further. In 2021, Bishop's 20-year-old son, named after her late brother, was fatally shot in an unrelated incident. The cycle of violence had claimed another victim. Bishop now resides in the Julia Tutwiler Prison for Women in Alabama. Her case stands as one of the most disturbing examples of a killer teacher, a brilliant mind corrupted by unresolved violence, professional failure, and systemic enablement. If you thought this was intense, our next case involves a teacher whose darkness ran even deeper, as he committed a shocking, unreasonable, and unprovoked murder that no one saw coming. July 26, 2025, Devil's Den State Park, Arkansas. The day's quiet is shattered when two sisters run for help their parents left behind on the trail. What happened next would leave the entire nation horrified and expose a darkness lurking behind a seemingly ordinary teacher. Andrew James McGann was about to start a new teaching job in Springdale, Arkansas that fall. But before his first day in the classroom, he would commit an act that defies all logic and reason. A brutal, seemingly random double murder in broad daylight. The Brinks family had just moved to Prairie Grove from North Dakota, looking forward to making new memories in their new home state. Clinton and Kristen Brink took their daughters out for what should have been a simple hike at Devil's Den State Park. But about half a mile into the trail, their peaceful day turned into a nightmare. The attack happened quickly. Clinton Brink was struck first. In a moment of sheer bravery, Kristen rushed her daughters to safety, then returned to help her husband. Both parents were fatally stabbed, protecting their children until the very end. Their daughters survived, but their lives were forever changed. As news of the attack spread, state police launched a massive manhunt. Hundreds of tips poured in from the public, over 500 in total. Surveillance footage captured a suspicious black sedan with its license plate covered in tape leaving the area. This critical detail would ultimately lead investigators to the killer. The suspect was identified as 28-year-old Andrew James McGann. He was arrested at a barbershop in Springdale, just 30 miles north of the park, ending a 5-day manhunt. Police found evidence at his residence tying him to the crime, including the murder weapon and items consistent with the attack. During questioning, McGann admitted to killing the Brinks. DNA evidence from the scene matched his own. He had also sustained cuts on his hands during the struggle, a physical link to the brutality of the attack. The murder was completely random. Authorities found no connection between McGann and the Brinks family. This senseless violence shocked the community, especially considering McGann's recent background as a teacher. Digging into his past, investigators found a pattern of disturbing behavior in McGann's teaching career. At his previous job in Flower Mound, Texas, he was placed on administrative leave for concerns about classroom management, professional judgment, and favoritism towards certain students. Parents described him as cold, standoffish, and disinterested in his students. One mother reported that her son noticed McGann showing unusual attention to certain girls in the class. Despite these concerns, an internal investigation found no evidence of inappropriate behavior with students. McGann resigned instead of facing further scrutiny. After leaving Texas, McGann taught 5th grade in Broken Arrow, Oklahoma. He passed all background checks there, and no issues were reported during his time at the school. But his troubled teaching record and odd behavior now appear as warning signs in hindsight. The Brinks daughters provided critical information that helped investigators identify their parents' killer. Their courage in the face of unimaginable tragedy was praised by law enforcement. McGann was charged with 2 counts of capital murder. Prosecutors announced they would not waive the death penalty in his case. At his first court appearance, he pleaded not guilty, despite previously confessing to the crime. The community struggled to understand how a teacher, someone entrusted with safety, could commit such a senseless act of violence. While investigators continue to search for a motive, the evidence points to a completely random attack by a man with a history of questionable behavior around children. The Brinks family paid the ultimate price, but their story serves as a sobering reminder that evil can sometimes hide behind the most ordinary facades. Their daughters survived because of their parents' bravery, a legacy that will endure long after justice is served. Even though the unprovoked nature of the murders was very disturbing, the next teacher's inability to hide his feelings for a student resulted in something far more sinister than anyone could have ever imagined. January 14th, 1997. A quiet night in Homestead, Florida, turns tragic when Nathaniel Melson, a respected computer teacher at Miami-Dade Community College, becomes the center of a horrific double murder suicide that leaves a community in shock. At just 29 years old, Melson was known as a bright young educator with a promising future. But underneath his professional exterior, a dangerous obsession was brewing. It all started when he began tutoring Kathy Aseri privately. What began as an innocent teacher-student relationship quickly turned into something more sinister. Kathy soon realized that Melerson's interest extended beyond academics. She became uncomfortable with his growing attention and asked him to stop visiting, citing his increasingly problem person behavior. But Mellerson wasn't ready to let go. According to his mother, Patricia Mellerson, her son had quietly dated Kathy for several months. But 2 months before that fateful night, he discovered a devastating truth. Kathy was already married and living with her husband, Jeffrey Essery, at her parents' home. This revelation shattered Mellerson's fragile emotional state. On the evening of January 14th, Mellerson arrived at the Reed family home, where Kathy lived with her husband and parents. Thomas and Lori Reed, Kathy's parents, had no idea about any romantic involvement between their daughter and Mellerson. They welcomed him in, unaware of the darkness brewing beneath his calm exterior. When Kathy and Jeffrey returned home, a confrontation erupted. Jeffrey and Mellerson struggled, and shots rang out. Jeffrey was fatally wounded. As Kathy leaned over her husband's body in disbelief and horror, Mellerson turned his weapon on her, ending her life as well. In a final act of desperation, Mellerson turned the gun on himself. Thomas and Lori Reed, fearing for their own lives, managed to escape through a bedroom window. They've remained in seclusion since that traumatic night, trying to process the unimaginable loss and violence that shattered their home. Metro-Dade police quickly closed the investigation, piecing together the tragic sequence of events. Detective Brian Calloway confirmed the case's closure, but the emotional scars left behind would linger for years. Friends from the Reed's Church, First Baptist Church of Redlands, rallied to support the grieving family. The church's pastor, Rev. Bill Baggett, expressed the community's collective shock and sorrow. All of us can hurt with them, but none of us can hurt like that. Patricia Mellerson, Nathaniel's mother, summed up the tragedy. It's sad for all parties. It's sad for Kathy and her husband. I wouldn't want that to happen to anyone. It's sad for my son, who had a bright future in front of him. 3 young people have lost their lives. This devastating case serves as a stark reminder of how quickly obsession can turn deadly, especially when boundaries are crossed in teacher-student relationships. But as dark as this story is, the next case shows us what happens when you deal with a teacher with unchecked mento. August 20th, 1982, Miami, Florida. Carl Robert Brown, a 51-year-old former history teacher, mounted his bicycle, loaded with a 12-gauge shotgun and a basket full of ammunition. He wasn't riding to a classroom that morning. He was headed toward a deadly rampage that would end with 8 people dead, 3 wounded, and his own violent demise just blocks away. Brown's story began decades earlier with all the makings of a respectable life. Born November 26, 1930 in Chicago, he served honorably in the U.S. Navy before pursuing a career in education. By the early 1960s, he was a familiar face at Hialeah Junior High School, teaching history and moonlighting as an accounting instructor at Miami-Dade Community College. Colleagues described him as militaristic, disciplined, precise, and once notably gregarious. But beneath that disciplined veneer, cracks began to show. Students and teachers alike noticed his growing eccentricities. His once controlled classroom became a stage for rambling diatribes about everything from communism to his personal grievances. He'd chase students with a stapler, deliver incoherent lectures about infancy laws, and rant about his self-proclaimed status as the Logos, the controlling principle of the universe. One of his last evaluations called his classroom total and complete chaos. The principal wrote, "I am concerned for the safety of the students, and also Mr. Brown." Brown's personal life unraveled alongside his career. His first wife died. His second marriage collapsed due to his refusal to seek psychological help, and he became increasingly isolated, both at home and at work. Neighbors heard him firing shots at night, found him picking grapefruits in his underwear, and endured his early morning shouts of United States as he wandered their yards. By 1982, Brown's mental health had deteriorated so severely that school officials placed him on medical leave. A psychiatrist diagnosed severe anxiety associated with some paranoid and grandiose ideas and noted a probable thinking disorder. Yet, even then, the doctor believed Brown was not dangerous, just unusual and disorganized. But Brown's instability was becoming a dangerous powder keg. The day before his rampage, he visited Bob Moore's welding and machine service to dispute a $20 repair bill for a lawnmower engine he wanted to use to power his bicycle. When his traveler's check was refused, he exploded into threats. "I would like to kill the SOB Americans and you too," he spat at welder Jorge Castellanos. The staff didn't take his threats seriously. That evening, Brown went to a gun store, purchasing 2 shotguns, a semi-automatic rifle, and ammunition with no waiting period. Early the next morning, he invited his 10-year-old son to join him on his outing. "I'm going to kill a lot of people," he announced. His son wisely declined. Shortly before 11 a.m., Brown arrived at the welding shop, shotgun slung over his shoulder, Panama hat perched on his head. He walked through the building methodically, shooting everyone in his path, most at close range, some more than once. 3 were killed in the office, others in the work area or driveway. In total, 6 employees died immediately, 2 more succumbed to their wounds, and 3 others managed to escape. With 20 shells still in his pockets, Brown casually mounted his bicycle and pedaled away, appearing very passive and very nonchalant, as if simply leaving for a stroll. But his bloody ride was about to end. Mark Cram, a nearby metal shop employee, heard about the massacre and immediately grabbed his .38 revolver. He picked up Ernest Hammett, who was flagging down cars, and together they pursued Brown. A warning shot over his head struck Brown in the back. When he turned to aim his shotgun at his pursuers, they ran him down with their car, crashing him into a concrete light pole. Brown died moments later. The aftermath revealed the full extent of Brown's unraveling. Police found a cassette tape in his house where he called himself Logos, declaring, "God through me is responsible for the good and bad sounds in your head." The murders left 8 dead: Nelson Barrios, Lonnie Jeffries, Carl Lee, Ernestine Moore, Manga Moore, Martha Steelman, Juan Ramon Tres Palacios, and Pedro Vasquez, and 3 wounded: Eduardo Lima, Carlos Vasquez Sr., and Carlos Vasquez Jr. Brown's rampage became the deadliest mass shooting in Miami-Dade history, and a chilling warning about the dangers of untreated mental illness and easy access to firearms. His case sparked debates about gun control and mental health intervention, but ultimately, the lessons faded with time. Yes, mental illness is bad, and yes, unchecked mental illness seems worse. But what happens when a school principal allows greed to take over him entirely?
It has been 8 years now since the battered and drugged body of Upper Merion schoolteacher Susan Reinert was found in a car trunk in Harrisburg. Her 2 children have never been found.
June 1979. The battered body of Upper Merion High School teacher Susan Reinert is discovered in a Harrisburg parking lot. Her 2 children, Karen and Michael, have vanished without a trace. The case that would rock the educational world and become one of Pennsylvania's most haunting mysteries was just beginning. J.C. Smith was the principal of Upper Merion Area High School at the time. By all accounts, he was strict but respected. A decorated Army colonel turned educator who'd earned both a doctorate and a reputation for discipline. But beneath the surface, a web of secrets was about to unravel. Reinert's murder was brutal. Her body, wrapped in chains and stuffed in the trunk of her own car, showed signs of being both beaten and drugged with morphine. The investigation quickly revealed she'd taken out a massive $730,000 life insurance policy, naming her colleague, English Department Head William Bradfield, as the sole beneficiary. The connection between Smith and Bradfield proved critical. While the 2 men publicly maintained separate lives, evidence would later suggest a more complex relationship, one that involved Reinert, financial gain, and ultimately, murder. The missing children added a horrifying dimension. Their bodies were never found, and their disappearance remains one of Pennsylvania's deepest unsolved mysteries. Smith, who was already facing prison time for unrelated robberies and drug charges, became entangled in the murder investigation. The timeline was damning. He arrived late to a sentencing hearing in Harrisburg, just hours after Reinert's body was discovered nearby. A key piece of evidence, a green pin belonging to Karen Reinert, was found under the front passenger seat of Smith's car. Bradfield was tried first in 1983 and convicted of conspiracy to commit the murders. He received a life sentence. 3 years later, Smith was tried and found guilty of all 3 murders, Reinert and her 2 children. He was sentenced to death in 1986 and sent to Pennsylvania's death row. The case took a shocking turn in 1992. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court overturned Smith's conviction, citing egregious prosecutorial misconduct. Evidence had been hidden, deals with informants concealed, and critical information suppressed. In a rare move, the court ruled that Smith could not be retried, invoking double jeopardy protections because of the prosecution's misconduct. Smith walked free after 6 years on death row, but the stain of suspicion never faded. He spent his final years obsessed with clearing his name, writing a book that accused author Joseph Wambaugh, whose best-selling Echoes in the Darkness chronicled the case, of orchestrating his conviction. Smith died in 2009, maintaining his innocence until the end. The case left a permanent mark on Upper Merion High School and the surrounding community. Former students wrestled with the possibility that their principal, a man they once respected, could be capable of such horror. The mystery of the missing Reinert continues to haunt those who remember the case.
I was an easy target. Everybody was believing that I was involved in this criminal activity. So I was an easy target for Bradfield to frame.
Smith never admitted guilt. In interviews, he insisted Bradfield had framed him, pointing to his own troubled reputation as making him an easy target. But the evidence, circumstantial and otherwise, painted a chilling picture of calculated murder and betrayal.
I have trouble believing that Dr. Smith could have committed that crime.
Even though he was a little odd,
even though he was odd.
For many former students, the idea that their principal could commit such atrocities was unthinkable. Yet the weight of evidence, the insurance policies, the missing children, the found pin, remained impossible to ignore.
Killed Susan Reinert and had nothing to do with her murder or any crimes against her or her. Nothing whatever.
Smith's repeated denials failed to convince everyone. The combination of his legal troubles, the connections to Bradfield, and the overwhelming circumstantial evidence kept suspicion focused on him until his death.
You think they are guilty?
I wouldn't have prosecuted them unless I did.
The prosecuting team never wavered in their belief that Smith and Bradfield were guilty, despite the legal technicalities that freed Smith. For them, and for many in the community, justice was never truly served.
Do you ever think of those 2?
Every day.
The case remains open, the mystery unsolved. Susan Reinert's children are still missing, their fate unknown. The story of J.C. Smith stands as one of education's darkest chapters, a tale of ambition, betrayal, and murder that still haunts Pennsylvania to this day.